Welcome to this special edition of Hannity. Yesterday at the White House podium, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller called out the media for covering up Joe Biden's cognitive decline and explained that their negligence allowed an unelected bureaucracy to rule in President Joe's place. Take a look.
It is true that many of the people in this room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent and was not running the country. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. So I'm glad for the opportunity for a brief civics lesson. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. That president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one. What President Trump is doing is he is removing federal bureaucrats who are defying democracy by failing to implement his lawful orders, which are the will of the whole American people.
Love that Government 101 lesson with Stephen Miller. You'll never guess who shockingly agrees with him. None other than George Clooney. The liberal Hollywood actor told the New York Times he believes that Biden and his team covered up Biden's clearly declining health and that the media, quote, dropped the ball on trying to root out the truth. Here now with reaction are Project 21 Chairman Horace Cooper and Democratic pollster Doug Schoen. Doug, you don't speak for the Democratic Party, but I'm sure you've been around the likes of the George Clooneys, the elite and the effete, who really do have positions on some issues that compel them to want to be involved in politics and help public servants, but they just seem so tone deaf to what the rest of the country is thinking now. What has happened in terms of Hollywood's intersection with the Democratic Party such that neither seems to have much going on, much respect vis-a-vis the American people these days?
Well, Kellyanne, you took the words out of my mouth. I have a lot more respect and interest in what the American people think and the popular will than I do for what Hollywood elites, whether it be George Clooney or anyone else, thinks. And as to the substance of what Stephen Miller said, I don't think I'd put it quite the way he did, but it sure is the case that Joe Biden was not up to the job, shouldn't have been there, and most assuredly shouldn't have run for re-election. I think what's gratifying is that it was ultimately the American people who got Joe Biden to drop out, and it was the American people who rejected the Biden-Harris policies. So there was a Democratic election, and I very much am committed to more Democratic elections, whatever the result, whether my side or the other side wins.
And Doug, all the latest polls show the Democratic Party is having a crisis of confidence vis-a-vis the American people. They're looking for a new messenger, but I would argue they don't have much of a message. What's your 1, 2, 3 advice to the Democrats?
Well, first, they should agree with President Trump on issues where there's no disagreement. Reducing inflation, the cost of living, reducing the size and scope of government, taxation, we need tax cuts. And we also need border security. I'm for bipartisan solutions on everything. We Democrats can disagree on issues we do disagree on. We did that with Bill Clinton. And I'd make the argument to my party, rather than trying to defy the popular will, they should understand it and govern or try to govern with it and distinguish themselves where that's appropriate, not yell, scream, and create chaos where none need exist.
And show up outside, Horace, with all their silly signs about Elon Musk and the J6 pardons and all this other stuff they constantly want to run on, which isn't much of a message. Horace Cooper, sew this all up for us, because what George Clooney is trying to do is get a pass for being complicit and being part of the cover-up and the crime of allowing Joe Biden to stay in as president when he clearly saw him at these fundraisers, clearly knew people who were around him, and didn't get to the New York Times until his friend Barack Obama said, please write an op-ed saying Joe Biden should leave after that debate. But Horace, George Clooney never says what Doug Schoen says, does he? that, hey, now's the time to put our muskets down and get some bipartisan action on the things that our country really needs?
You know, there are a couple of big observations to be made about the President Biden's obvious mental decline. First is that our founders gave us a First Amendment, not because it's great to be a journalist. There's nothing wrong with being a journalist, but they wanted the American people to be informed, to be able to hold their government accountable. The fifth estate dropped the ball entirely because they have become cheerleaders instead of people holding those in power accountable. The second observation is when you don't have a competent leader and instead the bureaucracy runs the place, they don't know what it means to be politically accountable. They don't run for office. They don't stand up in front of God and everybody and say, this is what we're going to do. I wrote a book called Put Joe Back in Chains, which outlines the terrible policies that were put forward by the Biden administration, obviously by people who didn't understand that these thoughts, these views, these regulations were hated by the American people and harmed them. The media failed us, and our system requires our president to be able to implement policies, and that those are the policies that we hold him accountable for.
Doug Schoen and Horace Cooper, excellent insights. I mean, the fear of Donald Trump coming back is actually helped him get back, and the way they treated him helped him resurrect, and now he's really pulling out root and branch so many of the bad programs they put in there. Thank you very much.